If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Welcome to episode 46 of the Fitness Mama podcast. I am your host, Kath Bequee. I'm a mum of 3 young girls, a physio for women, and I have an online community, Fitness Mama, which helps to provide pregnant and new mothers with the exercises, support, and resources they need to feel good from the inside out as they prepare for and recover from pregnancy and childbirth. Fitness Mama has workouts that are tired mum friendly, achy mama friendly, and toddler friendly that you can do from the convenience of your home at the end of a long day whilst your bubba sleeps or whilst your toddler is running around causing havoc. So in today's episode, I'm excited to have a chat to Lana Hirth, who is a dietitian in the area of women's health, pregnancy and postpartum. So Lana likes to focus on that interpartum nutrition period to help new mums optimise their nutrition so that they can live life to the full. Lana also hosts the New Mums Nutrition podcast, and she runs a virtual private practice and online masterclasses. So in today's episode, we chat about constipation during pregnancy and that afterbirth period, because constipation is really common and it's something that isn't talked about that much, I don't think, during pregnancy and after birth. Constipation is thought to affect up to 50% of pregnant women at some stage during their pregnancy. That's 1 in 2 women. So with Lana, we have a chat about some foods that can be included in the diet to help. Lana chats about ways to help relieve constipation during pregnancy and after birth. And she gives a lot of great bits of information, lots of advice, and it is worth listening to even if you don't suffer from constipation. Because let's face it, you might, if you don't at the moment, you might in the future. But overall, Lana gives some really great information on diet during pregnancy and postpartum, whether or not you have constipation or not. So before we do jump into this episode, I do want to let you know about a 7-day free trial of Fitness Mama. And in these free 7 days, you can dive into a whole bunch of on-demand Pilates classes and workouts that you'd like, specific for pregnancy and postpartum. And there's also a whole lot of guest expert speakers and Q&As covering topics including hypnobirthing, induction, breastfeeding, sex after childbirth, abdominal muscle separation, pregnancy-related pelvic pain, cesarean scar massage, mastitis, and more. So all you need to do is head to fitnessmama.com/free. Right, let's get into the show. Hello, Lana. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So we're going to be chatting about a fun topic, not at all fun, but a really good topic to be talking about in pregnancy because it's really common, it's a big issue, and we're going to be chatting about constipation during pregnancy and postpartum. So it's a great topic, so thank you. To start off with, could you please introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't know who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Lana and I run an online virtual clinic where I can see clients from all over Australia, and I run masterclasses as well as I'm the host of the podcast New Mums Nutrition. And so I had been seeing women come into clinic for years who wanted to get healthy, but the reason they wanted to was because they were looking at starting a family soon and they wanted to manage some of their health conditions or just optimize their nutrition. Or during pregnancy, they wanted to know how to eat well and were confused about what they were allowed to eat and weren't allowed to eat. And then afterwards, whether it's like we're going to talk about today, constipation, or managing what they're eating for breastfeeding or helping with their weight management. I just had so many women come and see me, and I thought this is such an opportunity to help women in this space, and there's not enough information in this area. And so, yeah, I really dove in, and that's why I started the podcast, and that's why my clinic is devoted to helping particularly pregnant and postnatal women.
It's amazing. Like everything you just said, you'd think that dietitian during pregnancy or postpartum is quite a niche area, but you have just said so many different things that you can help women with. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we don't realise that nutrition can play a really big role in helping, not only for the sake of mums who often get neglected, especially when the baby comes along, but also setting that baby up for their long-term health. And so if we can help people make it easier, I'm all about making it as easy and practical as possible, then that's a win.
Oh, brilliant. So we could probably talk all day about so many different topics. We might have to get you back on the podcast, but
definitely.
Today I was, hoping to chat to you about constipation, because it's an area that we perhaps don't talk about as much, but it's really common during pregnancy and postpartum. So from your perspective, why do you feel it's such a big thing in pregnancy and after birth?
That's a good question. I think there are different things that contribute to constipation during both pregnancy and after birth. But I think, first of all, sometimes we get confused about what actually is constipation. And so I think sometimes it's helpful because some of my clients will say, I don't go every single day, so I must be constipated. And so just knowing when we're talking about constipation that if you have sort of those separate hard lumps like rabbit stools, or that's sausage shaped but lumpy, and if you're straining a lot, or it's really hard to pass those stools, or you feel like you're not quite empty, if you have that sort of what we call incomplete evacuation, those are signs that you could be constipated. And I think, to be honest, in my experience, women in pregnancy and postpartum, they know when they're constipated. They're like, yep, you're ticking all those boxes, that's me. And so particularly in pregnancy, there's a few things that cause it. One is the hormones that are going in people's body. We have a rise in progesterone, which slows everything down and relaxes everything, but it does that with your muscles, but also your intestines, and that contributes to constipation, particularly first trimester. If you're getting constipated in your first trimester, blame it on the progesterone. If it's later in pregnancy, that's really to do with the baby and the baby's size. And as your baby in your uterus grows, it puts pressure on your lower intestines and your rectum, which is where your stools are stored. So that can just make it so much more difficult to pass. And the third one, let's come back to a more nutrition-related one, is nutrition supplements. Some of them contain, especially the prenatal supplements, can contain so much iron that it might not be the right supplement for you, especially if you're getting quite constipated. And so that's where I really focus on individually tailoring supplements to each woman, because some supplements have excessive amounts of iron, which can increase risk of constipation, and for some people increase their risk of gestational diabetes as well. So it's really important that gets managed.
So you're saying, how can iron relate to gestational diabetes?
Yeah, so there's some studies that show an increased link of when women have higher iron, particularly in supplemental form, because that's the easiest way to get excess iron. There's just a correlation between women who take high iron and then women who end up developing gestational diabetes. And so I said before I work in postnatal nutrition, but I love the interpartum nutrition space, which is from when you've had your first baby to your next baby, that time in between there. We can take some really valuable information about your first pregnancy and help you to optimize in your next pregnancy. So particularly if you've had gestational diabetes, that might be where a supplement that's slightly lower in iron, but still making sure that you're not becoming iron deficient. So it's a very tricky balance that we have to play. that we're keeping all of that in mind through your postpartum journey and as you think about baby number 2, if that's an option for you.
I love the fact that you just mentioned that, because we're better at looking after our bodies when we're pregnant. We're shocking in that after birth period because we're so focused on the baby and we're tired and all the rest. But then to be able to optimize our body in, as you said, that interpartum period, that in-between pregnancy period, that's brilliant.
And I think we're on survival mode in that 4th trimester, and I think it helps to shape your nutrition priorities to help look after yourself as a mum, but also I think sometimes we're more motivated, potentially. Some of my clients are more motivated if they know this is going to have an impact on their baby's health, and we can use that to make a positive impact on both mum's health and babies.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So it's great to talk about constipation from your perspective, because as a pelvic floor physio, I'm often talking about constipation, but more from a pelvic floor perspective, because we know that chronic constipation, so if you've had chronic constipation for a long time or you've been straining on the toilet for a long time, that's not optimal for that pelvic floor area, and it might be a contributing factor to things such as prolapse, pelvic organ prolapse. So it's a very interesting area because we're all very concerned about pelvic floor strengthening, and generally everyone wants to strengthen their pelvic floor during pregnancy, but that ability to relax and let it go, let your pelvic floor muscles relax and let it go, particularly on the toilet, and breathing and opening the gates, so to speak, so that you can pass a bowel motion, is also really important. So from your perspective, what are some of the things that it's great for pregnant and new mums to do? And what's also some things for them to avoid? Like, are we able to break it down into those couple of categories?
Yeah, definitely. Just going back for a minute to what you said about the pelvic floor, I think it's so important, something I look out for my clients to refer them on to a women's health physio like yourself, because there's so much you can do with food, and food plays a really important role. And I heard recently this great analogy that women's health physios help work on the plumbing, but dietitians help work on the sludge that goes through. And so I just thought that was a funny analogy, but helps you actually realize that both are really key in helping to manage constipation. And so, from a food perspective, it can be simple, but it also can be complex. So if you're hearing some of those things that I'm about to go through, and you think, oh, I've tried this and it hasn't worked, that's where it might be more complex, and we might need to take a whole range of different approaches. Because typically what we say for constipation is thinking about having high fibre, so lots of fibre to bulk out your stools, having lots of fluid, so making sure that it's able to flow through. And particularly in pregnancy and postpartum, you have such high fluid requirements. And so that's where staying hydrated is so important, not only for things like managing the fatigue during pregnancy and postpartum, but also for your bowel health. And then as well is movement, which I feel like is more on the physio end of things, but that's one of the things I'll screen for is fibre, fluid and feet or movement. That's a really simple way I like to just tick off, okay, are these things happening? Let's work on this first before we try anything else, because sometimes that can be simple enough to manage it.
Yeah, love it.
But there are also some additional things, and I think some doctors might say, try taking, some Metamucil or some Benifiber. I don't know if you've heard that before, but that might actually make constipation worse for some people. So if we take something you've got constipation and things are hard to move through the pipes, if we add more bulk to it, it's just going to exacerbate the problem. And to be honest with you, most of the time I see people they might say, I find it really hard to go to the toilet and I feel really bloated and I feel really uncomfortable. That's because there's a lot of stuff in there that we're just not clearing out. And so supplements. It might be like fiber supplements. We might need to think about altering the different type of fiber, and it might be in the food that you're having. And this is down the more complex end of things. It might be that we think about the types of fiber, and there's a few different types of fiber, and it might be about manipulating the fiber that you're having to make sure that that's optimizing and helping clear things out for you before we then work on it. But I will share a hack for people listening today. I think this is fascinating. Kiwi fruits in particular are great for constipation. 2 kiwi fruits a day. If you've got a really sensitive gut, you might want to start with 1 kiwi fruit a day, but 2 kiwi fruits, they have been clinically shown to help with constipation. So there's a little hack, a practical hack for people.
Is that the fructose?
It's not so much the fructose. So fructose in particular would be in things like pears, if people have heard of pears.
Pear juice.
Or pear juice or prunes. That's particularly due to that, all those pea fruits. The reason for kiwi fruits is it has a particular enzyme in it called actinidin. And so the actinidin helps with digestive movement in the bowels. And so that's the particular reason why kiwi fruit is different. So you could use a combination of having kiwi fruit and using pears to get things moving.
Yeah, okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the fructose helps to draw the fluid into the bowel to help soften it. Is that correct? So it's a natural sort of stool softener, whereas you're saying the kiwi fruit helps to stimulate things naturally.
Yeah, that's right. And so fructose is the natural sugar that's found in fruit. But in particular, there are some fruits that have more fructose than glucose. Some fruits have sort of an equal amount. Other fruits have higher amounts of fructose than the other sugar, glucose. And so that's when your body goes, okay, well, I need to draw more water in here. And that's why those fruits help, because it's helping to soften things up.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And can I just backtrack a little bit on what you said earlier? For those listening that heard Lana say that Metamucil might not be helpful, I think we should just clarify that. So when we're looking at our stools, there's something called the Bristol stool type chart, which is really helpful. So type 1 and type 2 are the harder pellets that Lana was talking about. And then type 3, type 4 is more the sausage-like. So type 3 is a lumpy sausage. Type 4 is a smooth sausage. I'll keep going. And then type 5 and 6 is when it starts to get more liquid. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the Metamucil, that bulking agent, that's best if you're more in that softer lump to liquid, type 5, 6, 7. So not when you've got the hard pellets, it's more when you've got soft blobs or liquid to help bulk it up. Is that right?
Yeah, so generally speaking, that can be helpful, although for some people, if they have IBS, it can exacerbate the issue and it might make it worse. And so if you're someone who has IBS, that's where some more individualized advice could be really helpful for you. But generally, sometimes it can help even in that type. If you have sort of type 4 where it's like a smooth sort of sausage, then I wouldn't really recommend that you need any additional help. But if you're at the type, if you've got those pellets, I would be very cautious, and it's very rare that I recommend just adding some Metamucil. But yes, definitely down that softer, that more liquidy runny end, that might help to do that bulking.
Yeah, great. And do you always recommend people do this in conjunction with seeing their GP as well?
Yeah, definitely, especially if the constipation is quite chronic, then working as a team together, just like a women's health physio and a dietitian would work together. Actually, a GP is a really key part in that, particularly looking at your history of, have you always had struggled with constipation, or has it just come out of the blue, or has it come because of pregnancy or postpartum or something else? That sometimes that could be a red flag for other things. And so if you've had some other dramatic changes at the same time, whether that be some dramatic weight loss or something, that's actually a red flag that we might need to investigate things further. But even in terms of getting you on a really good laxative regime, that can be really effective. And sometimes we need to clear things out really well, and we need not be afraid of taking laxatives to help support, as you know, as your pelvic floor, to help keep things regular, to keep you more comfortable. And then we can look at working together at maintaining a normal bowel function for you. Do you experience that as well? Do you often work with GPs in this area?
Yes, 100%. And I know, like, although I'm happy to recommend things, I always know when it's not my area. And anytime it goes into the medication side of things, I'm like, look, let's just go and chat to your GP. And just while we're on that note, what do you think of long-term stimulants for the bowels, like Coloxone, Senna, and that sort of thing? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great that you mentioned keeping in your scope of practice, because the laxative world, I leave that really to the GPs to manage that. The general recommendation is that long-term use is not recommended. It depends from client to client. The long-term goal, and for most of my clients that I see, is wanting to be able to manage and just have a normal functioning bowel where they don't have to rely on all these extra things. And so there may be times where, especially those first few weeks postpartum, things like medications and dehydration and the supplements and recovering from birth and not really moving as much can all contribute to this beautiful storm of constipation, plus being really sensitive down there as well. And so there is definitely a place, but my approach is always, if we can get people managing things with food, then I have a food first approach, even when it comes to nutrition supplements. If we can get it from food first and manage things with food, then that's great. But if we need other things, they're there to help us.
Okay. Let's go back to basics. So let's say a new mum comes and sees you, a pregnant woman, and has got issues with constipation. You talked about the FFF, the fibre, fluid and feet moving. Like, what else would you recommend for those women that come to see you?
So for those women who are coming to see me, like, we definitely focus on what to eat, but we're also thinking about how we eat as well. And so actually making sure we're eating in a regular pattern is really important, so that there's predictability for your gut to get into a rhythm of moving things through. And so especially for toileting behaviours and techniques, which I think is more down your alley of actually how to do that. But in terms of timing of sort of teaching your body to go at a regular time, actually eating can really help to promote sort of movement through the digestive system. And so actually regular meal times is really important in that. And I think some people don't factor something like that in, because we're just normally focused on what we need to eat. And that can be really challenging, especially as a new mum, which is why sometimes small snacks can be really, really helpful. Even if it's just those one-handed snacks, having those small regular meals to help things keep going.
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Yeah, you're right. I think that regular timing of the opening of your bowels is something that women tend to... Look, I am being very general here, so I'm happy to say that. But if men need to go, they go. And I reckon they're really good at sitting on the toilet, relaxing, taking their time, not rushing, and just letting it all happen naturally. Whereas I think women, whether or not you have kids, but particularly once you've got kids, you know, we've got a million things we need to do, and we probably don't have a long time that we can sit on the toilet. And I tend to think women defer that natural urge to go to the toilet. So they might, like after they've had their morning, have an urge to go to the toilet, but there's something that is more pressing that needs to be done, like a baby needs to be fed, or they need to get their kids breakfast or get them ready for school or whatever it is. So you put off that urge or you ignore it, and then what can happen is, like, the longer the stool stays in your system, water's drawn from it, and then it's a bit of a cycle. So, yeah. So the tip for anyone listening, is if you get the urge, just try to go. I know it's hard though.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so coming back to some of the food things, I think keeping it really practical, we're talking about fibre, that's really general. But if we're thinking about specific foods, we're thinking things like our whole grains, so whether that's grainy bread, rolled oats, some quinoa, rice, maybe some whole grain pasta as well. That's all really important, as well as fresh fruit, plenty of vegetables, including things like legumes and even things like nuts and seeds. The different types of foods give us different types of fibre as well, and they'll have different compositions of fibre. So making sure you're getting a variety of those things is a really key part, and something that I look for in clients to see how are you going, and are you getting enough serves of fruit and enough serves of vegetables, and how could we optimize these to help with how your bowels are at the moment.
And what you say is so simple, right? But again, it can be really challenging practically to do that.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why I said at the beginning, if we can make it simple and practical for you, then that's the goal. And so it might sound really like, oh, I've heard that I need to eat my 2 serves of fruit, but actually, if I need to have some more fibre to help with my constipation, and 2 serves of fruit can help there, especially if you add some kiwi fruit and some pears in, then making it more targeted and specific to you is going to help. But it does sound really simple and basic, but I think sometimes, to be honest, we overlook the really simple and basic things and think that we need special fibre supplements, or there are other supplements that may help with constipation, but I use those as more of a last resort because I know these things are far more effective. We've got enough when we're pregnant and with a newborn to be worried about having all these fancy meals, and we've got so much on our plate. I like to say, let's make it as simple as we can when it comes to food, but still make it effective. That's going to help you to get the results that you want, whether that's a nice, healthy bowel, then that's what we'll aim for.
That's great what you were just mentioning. I think it will really resonate with a lot of people, that it doesn't have to be complicated, but let's try to factor in during the day a few things to help. So is there anything that we should be avoiding?
The biggest thing is just thinking that you need to take more fibre supplements to help, because I generally like to focus on what we can be including to help, and that's a more positive and more friendly as well. But in terms of things to avoid, for some people it might be avoiding even the really high fibre foods that potentially could make constipation worse. So for some people, especially if you've had constipation on and off for 10 years, adding more high fibre foods might be the wrong approach for you. It might be about, so we know nuts are really high in fibre. It might be choosing to have softer fibre food. So instead of a nut, it might be nut paste. You're still getting the fibre, but more in a softer form. Or it might be like having bananas is okay to have. That's in a soft form, even though it's got fibre, it's more of that soft, spongy form as opposed to this really hard, tough, what we call insoluble fibre that just adds to bulk everything up. That might just make things worse. And so that's where I said, when it comes to constipation, knowing how it's happened for you, it's really individualized. But sometimes I think the biggest mistake, and what I'd love for people to take away from this, is not always about adding more fibre, because you might just make things worse and feel worse.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, I think you've given a lot of food for thought, and I'm hoping anyone listening who has got a few issues with constipation might be able to take away a few nuggets and try to incorporate them into your day-to-day. So thank you, Lana. For those who would like to find more of you, how can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Lana Hirth Dietitian. You can jump over to the New Mums Nutrition podcast, and you can find all those details on my website as well at lanahirth.com. If you're wanting more one-on-one advice, that's where you can book in with me. All the details are there to set up a one-on-one consult. So there's lots of different ways you can get in touch. Choose whichever one suits you best.
Amazing. Thank you. And I'll have all those links in the show notes too.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, Lana. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. It was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. And I've just loved being able to chat about the combination of pelvic floor and constipation, because I think they just go together so well.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even touch on the pelvic floor side of things. I just touched the surface, so might have to do another episode soon.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Lana. We'll chat soon.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer: materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'll see you soon.